Good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon to our distinguished guest, Dr. Abhay Kumar, Honorable Vice Chancellor of IEC University. Sir, welcome to Research Cell, Dayanand Sagar University. I heartily welcome Dr. M.K. Banga, our beloved Dean for Research Cell, Dayanand Sagar University, who has been taking all the initiative in order for us to do lot many things at the university. I welcome Dr. Abhay Kumar sir for accepting our invitation to be interviewed on the perspectives about the new education policy 2020, about which I think all stakeholders across the state and the country are eager to know more about what this policy holds for them. Thank you very much, sir, for your kind time that you're giving to us.
Please accept my sincere thanks, Dr. Banga and Dr. Anupama from the Dayanand Sagar University Research Cell for giving me this opportunity, in fact, because it's a pleasure to dwell on something so important for the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Just for the understanding of all our viewers who would be watching this interview over a period of time, which includes students, teachers, parents, and other stakeholders, I would like to give a very short introduction of Dr. Abhay Kumar. His illustrious career and the leadership qualities are very many, and I can take a lot of time. Professor Abhay Kumar has acquired his PhD from the Department of Business Management, Garhwal University, Srinagar. He has completed his MBA from Motilal Nehru Institute of Research and Business Administration, University, Allahabad in the year 1980. He had also been elected as a social secretary for the prestigious Dr. Amarnath Jha Hostel, University of Allahabad. Professor Abhay Kumar has a total experience of more than 38 years, and he has been an entrepreneur for 3 years and worked in the industry for over 16 years as senior manager personnel. However, he has taken keen interest in the field of marketing management, and strategy has been his forte. He has more than 19 years of experience in teaching and research. He has held very senior positions both in the academia and the industry, and he has organized and chaired several national and international conferences, seminars, workshops, symposiums, and colloquiums. He has also been the keynote speaker, chief guest at a number of conferences, seminars, and other programs, and he has been instrumental in the organization of various FDPs and MDPs. He is a member of numerous bodies related to higher education and is on the board of management, advisory board, as well as member of EOS, that is Board of Studies, and RDC of a good number of institutes and universities. He is also on the advisory board of many corporate organizations and NGOs. Some of the examples are he was nominated as a WES Ambassador, Higher Education, for the 15th World Education Summit Mumbai, organized by Alex Technomedia Private Limited. He has been the member advisory board of Lexicon Management Institute of Leadership and Management, Pune. And he has been awarded many awards across the country and abroad. We welcome you heartily, sir, and we would like to start with the interview.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anupama.
All right.
In fact, I personally feel that the new education policy which has just come recently is a historic moment for this country, especially coming after long 34 years. Now, when we talk about the new education policy, we have to go into the basic salient features, and then we can relate it to how it affects society in general. When we talk about school education, for instance, to begin with, say from the 10+2 system, we have now come to 5+3+3+4 system. Why? We have incorporated the preschool also into the mainstream of school education. Now that becomes very important because it is aptly said that at a very tender age, whatever we give inputs to the children, they would carry it, imbibe it, and that would be almost permanent. The maximum part of the brain works as this tender age. So this has become a very important aspect. Then, of course, as far as either school education or higher education is concerned, both have now been brought under one body each. For instance, in higher education, the AICT and the UGC, as you aptly said, have come together, and that was, of course, ease regulation. Now, when we are talking about school education, well, everything was based on rote learning methodology. Now, scoring 97 marks was also not enough for students to get admissions in top colleges of India. Now, what did this effect? The effect was so rampant that we have seen so many suicides recently and in the past few years. Why? Because academically, if a student scores 98 and another student could not score 60, it does not necessarily imply that he or she cannot be successful in life. Therefore, when the school education aspect is considered, I think from standard 6 onwards, the students have been given the opportunity to do internships in organizations. They can do coding. Now, why teach coding from standard 6 onwards? You know, when we retrospectively go back on what China had done, they had also introduced coding and computer literacy at a very tender age. And what happened after 20-25 years, when the students graduated and came into the mainstream of the education and economy, China had a boom in terms of cyber literacy and cloud. Now, that gave it such a fillip and uplift in terms of performing in the world economy that I cannot express how to give you an input that India also needs that. And this particular national education policy would definitely give the same inputs. I'm very sure of it. Moreover, in the initial stages of schooling, say when the students are to be taught in the regional languages or in their mother tongue, I think that is very important, because how can we expect a student from a rural background or even in a hilly area of Himachal Pradesh, for instance, where IC University is located, to start studying in English at that tender age? I think that would again be rote learning. Now, studying for the exams and just vomiting, let me use that word because I often use it, and then suddenly get good marks, but knowing nothing. The knowledge application part was zero. Now, from 8th to 11th, again, the students are supposed to make a choice of the subjects. The concentration now would be on skilling, on instilling and imbibing those skills in the students, which are related to their own interest areas and about which they are passionate. Till now, the peer pressures from the parents, from the society, forced the students to take a particular stream. I think arts or even taking commerce was sometimes considered to be below dignity for some of the parents I've been in touch with. So science, not getting science sometimes was a failure on the part of the students. Now that is all gone. We should not ever consider that to be a good aspect of any school education. If my interest is in music or sports, then why shouldn't I go for it? Because I would be performing better and contributing to the country in a better way in that particular area. Therefore, now inclusivity, as the Honorable Prime Minister has used the word often, should be brought into fore. How? The students can choose from a bouquet of subjects. Like for instance, if a student is interested in taking science, but at the same time he has a passion for music or arts or history, he or she can take that as well. So that is an opportunity which we should give to every citizen of the country to pursue a career of his or her own choice. Now, what happens is that once you take a science stream, for instance, in the school level, you cannot change it post a certain level in higher education also. You cannot just go back and take arts in a second year or in a third year of a graduation, for instance. Therefore, these things have become very important. And, you know, in tune with the national education policy which had come, I think in terms of, it has already emanated from the right to education perspective, in which more than 2 crore out of school children are to be brought back into the school system again. Moreover, if we consider the gross enrollment ratio, say it is somewhere around 27%, it was 26.3 in 2018. Now, from 27%, the government say thinks of taking it up to say 50% by 2035. Now, if that happens, I think a major chunk of the deprived lot would also be able to come and join school education. Therefore, what we have to do further, once the school education system has settled down, and this is the time when students' mindsets are made or broken. In fact, we at higher education institutions sometimes crib that the schools are not giving us the required quality which we need. Now, that cribbing should stop in the times to come, in the years to come. We already had the Niti Aayog in place just before the National Education Policy had come. We had Atal Innovation Mission. We had Atal Tinkering Labs in schools. But then there were 5,441 schools probably who had Atal Tinkering Labs installed with them, which gave them inclusive education, skilling, skills of collaboration, communication, then say how they should upskill themselves but then again they were caged. They were caged into the subject pattern system. If a science student has to upskill himself or herself only in that stream, again that was a cage they were caught in. Now the national education policy would release them from this, liberate them in fact, and they would be completely free to choose which career to pursue even on the standard 10th or 11th level. Now, let's move to the higher education system. As far as the higher education system is considered, I think the best part I can see being a vice chancellor of a private university is that all universities are now at same par. Means whether it is a government university or a private government, the government has brought it at par. Now, these are some of the very good things going to happen. A credit bank is being established at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Multiple entry and exit policy has been put in place. Now, how is this going to benefit the students and the parents, for instance? Of course, we all know, maybe I'm repeating it, that once a student takes admission in an undergraduate course and he or she is not able to complete it for whatever reason, maybe due to certain say circumstantial situations, problems at home, or even he or she would like to go in for a practical experience and do a job for a year or two. So the first year would entail a certificate being awarded to the student, the second year a diploma, the third year maybe a degree, if it is a 3-year course, and the fourth year with a research project. Now, of course, we will definitely see a shift, not only in the students migrating from one institution to the other, maybe. Because, you know, having a credit in a bank, the government has to see that the student, if necessitated, and if he or she moves to a different city, he or she can take admission in some other organization as well, where he or she may be. It is not a necessity that he would have to go back to the same institution from where he or she has been awarded the certificate or the diploma. Therefore, the challenge would then be course curriculum. The structure of the course curriculum has to be in place so that it can be equitable in terms of the years in consideration across the country. Otherwise, the student might have to repeat something he or she may have studied. Now, again, we have also understood that core knowledge would be given to the students and certain extraneous things which put undue pressure would be removed from the course curriculum. The focus would be on the application part. Now, when the focus would be on the application part, I think practical and on-job projects, these things would be on the rise and students would be exposed to a variety of teaching pedagogies and methodologies which are not in place at present, like profuse use of videos, of many other such say techniques of teaching would be in place. Now, I think the national education policy has come at a very important moment, and especially at the juncture when the COVID-19 pandemic has caused technology disruption to disrupt education at present. A huge disruption has taken place by technology. We have all jumped onto online teaching. So when we have all jumped onto online teaching and online teaching is here to stay, of course, not to propagate that the importance of offline classroom teaching or point-to-point contact teaching is to be negated. Well, online teaching, of course, is not a substitute, but a supplement to the same. Yet, we will have to focus on online teaching as a primary teaching methodology, at least in the coming semesters. So, the national education policy also focuses on such aspects in which certain platforms have come up through this policy, which would help and facilitate a different teaching pedagogy in the times to come. Now, when we talk about multiple entry exit as well as credits being given, I think we are moving on the lines of what I so ardently have always propagated. I have been a proponent of the Guru Shishya Parampara. And in every organization that I have been, I have instituted serious mentorship programs. Now, mentorship, I think, in my thought process, has again been an extension of the Guru Shishya Parampara. Now, every mentor, for example, at our university, has about 7 to 8 students whom he or she would become a teacher guardian, for instance, as it is said in school. And they will not only look after the academic growth of the student, but they would be responsible for any behavioral changes, because we have students from so many diverse cultural backgrounds, that we have to see to it that any behavioral change may not be followed by any serious after effect. The university is a community in which the environment should be such that everyone should come and get assimilated in the environment. Therefore, these mentors are basically looking after every aspect of these students, and that is what used to happen in the age-old Indian setup of the Guru Shishya Parampara. Well, when we also talk about multiple skilling, like multidisciplinary aspects of education, which the new education policy talks about, we can find that in Indian history and Indian culture, say for example, take the great Kauravas and the Pandavas. Well, Bhima was so good in Gada use, Arjuna in terms of bows and arrows. Now, they were taught everything. The core knowledge was there. But then again, a specialization as per passion and interest came into being. So they were specialized in one particular skill in which they in turn became the best in the world. So what we talk about now is give them a core knowledge, but then make them good in at least one such aspect which makes them the best in their own terms. So this is how this multidisciplinary concept would grow. Of course, also, when we talk about teachers training program, I think something very good has been given by the National Education Policy. The same teacher training board would be instituted for the entire country. Of course, the states would have a major role to play, because that is how education is enshrined in the Constitution. But yet, what I perceive is that having one common pattern everywhere would make delivery also common and delivery also equitable for everyone. When we talk about accessibility, when we talk about equitability, I think these would be rendering such a great impact on the education system that every student in any state of India would be getting similar inputs by the teachers being trained in a similar fashion. So that is also one very good aspect which I find the education policy has given to us.
Sir,
yes, ma'am.
I had a question which I think is there in everybody's mind. Whoever I speak to, mostly as in their role as parents or as guardians and even students, as well as faculty members in the institutions, we are all keen to understand execution. When and how is this going to really get executed at the state level? It's a concurrent subject, so states will have to have something to do with the center, all of that. Task forces are being built. What is your perspective on that? Execution.
Uh, yes, I do agree with you. In fact, Dr. Anupama, the policy has just come, and I feel that people have just started imbibing and then uh, assessing and analyzing every single aspect. That is why we are talking here today. You know, the subject in question is so important in terms of how the execution would be done. I think the most important fact would not only be it being thrusted from the top, but leaders, education leaders who are there across the country, either as chancellors, vice chancellors, professors, associate professors, assistant professors, they have a very hard task at hand. Let me give them a word of caution also, because pedagogy is going to change, because course curriculums are going to be modified, new methods of teaching would be in place. The execution part would come from them basically. The guidelines can come from the top, but the work has to be done by all of us. And I tell you, it would not be an easy task, but of course, we Indians are always used to work hard. And any average Indian also who goes to the European and Western countries is very successful there, in spite of not having attained that much level of success in the country because of the competition. Therefore, the execution will be there. Maybe it would not be immediate. The batches who are already running their course curriculum, I think they will have to pass out. And the new batches, maybe from maybe this session or even the next, would have certain new things in place. But in fact, the vision is futuristic. The vision is futuristic. What this means is that it has not been done, that there would be a switch of a, say, a button and things would change overnight in India. What has not happened for the past 70 years, because during the colonial rule of the British, I think they installed purposely an education policy, as maybe some of us already have talked out between some of the academicians, to create clerks, babus to run their own, say, organizations. That the country should be run by such people who could not think on their own, should not be decision makers. They should simply follow the diktats of the English rulers. Therefore, to change it overnight is not going to happen. Well, what is important is, as I always say, when somebody asked me a question about entrepreneurship and how to bring up startups, my answer was, it is not startups which is important, it is the entrepreneurial mindset creation which is more important. That means that till our psyche compels us to do something anew, we will not be able to implement it in the best possible fashion. So what is more important is to give a proper orientation to the educational leaders, to the educationists, educators, so that they basically understand what this policy means for the country in the future. Then only we can say the execution is going to be at its best. But of course, it will be executed, that is for sure. And I am very, very positive that execution would start very soon.
So in this context, actually, since you raised it up, you said every stakeholder within an institutional framework would need to have an idea and some training. You mentioned, of course, the orientation is also there. I've heard from senior academicians about the fact that we do need to have orientation in every sphere. For example, an industry person, when they come to pursue research, especially in a research cell, when we do evaluation of research work, very senior vice chancellors, pro vice chancellors have mentioned, inculcate the spirit or the research orientation. So which is, as you rightly said today also, that orientation is required. And you have mentioned something about training. Do you think the institutional stakeholders themselves need a training about the policy and the methodology in which to be adopted? Are you talking about that?
Okay. I'm talking twofold. I'll give you. One is that to start with a brief, say, introduction that till now, probably the education sector used to have 1.6% of the GDP investment from the country. Now it is going to be almost 6%. In terms of research, India used to spend only about 0.69% of its GDP, whereas other countries like China and Europe and the United States, they spend more than 6% on research itself. Now, let me be very candid and honest. Sometimes research in some of the universities was more towards getting a degree to work in the university as per regulation and eligibility, rather than to promote that research and translate it into industrial output. Now, we don't want the research to be limited to the libraries. We want positive researches which can help India do something anew. Therefore, as I said, industry is of course an integral part, and industry and academia have to combine and collaborate. Without this, neither the industry would be getting the input they require in terms of students, and neither would the academia be able to progress. Because, you know, patents, research outputs, these are the things which build a country. Because, like for instance, if I talk about at present, how come so much research has been is being done by, especially in the pharma sector, for instance, post the COVID-19 situation, and how come India is on the verge of producing vaccine at 2 or 3 institutions? Now, this was not done before. So much so that where India did not produce even a single, say, a ventilator or mask earlier, everything was imported. Now, India is producing more than about 4.5 lakhs of such, say, masks and other essential items every day. Now, in terms of pharma, the generic medicines and API, which we used to say import from China, it is being produced in India. So when we talk about Make in India, we do have the required intellect, the required talent. But again, what is more important would be that the new education policy would give us the impetus to bring out the research potent within each individual faculty and student, and give them a basic assurance that if you do research, if you do proper patenting on your part, there would be a reward also for you. Therefore, investment on the part of the bodies which are to be constituted in terms of endowment fund, in terms of helping the faculty and the institutions, it is to be seen how it is to be done, but it has to be in place if we are to progress. This is what I meant.
Okay, sir. We will take a short break here. We will proceed into the next segment where we are going to look at the research aspect into the 4-year degree program, the focus on research universities, and we will also look at the regulation point of view. This we will do after a really short and quick break.
Sure.